Hi, I'm Carolyn, and with the ppl.Kickstarter, I help startups, scale-ups, and SMEs in tech to manage people well, to craft company culture intentionally, and to maximize impact with compelling communications along both. Because with the power of these three, you pull your team together long-term and are able to build a long-lasting, successful company. In today's episode, we will talk about all things boards, and I'm very excited about this one. With me is Daniel Aghdami. He's a co-founder and chairman of ppl, a startup that is on a mission to bring the best matching people onto boards with an algorithm and a community. Daniel, I'm very excited that you're here.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with me at Video House in Zurich. And tell me a little bit, how did you get into starting ppl for our viewers and watchers, so that they know your context?
It was basically through scratching our own itch. So we put together a board for one of the other companies that I founded about 14 years ago, and it had a huge impact on our business. So really helping us through crisis times, but also help leveraging the success in good times, and just realizing that many other startups didn't know about the huge impact that a board or advisory board can have on their business. And even if they did, they didn't really have access to a broader sort of pool of talent. So we just set about creating a solution, obviously enabled by technology, that would enable us to match fantastic talent with very promising startups.
Mm-hmm. Where are you now with ppl?
We are, even if I say so myself, I think doing really well. We're having a huge impact. So we launched with a pilot 4 years ago, and then took some time to sort of, after the success of that pilot, when we realized, okay, we've really got something here, we started working on creating the technology, light technology to start with. In the meantime, we've struck partnerships with the likes of the London Stock Exchange, IMD Business School. We're just about to launch another partnership with another university, with the Financial Times. And we've matched, or actually appointed, over 200 board members to the boards of companies, primarily startups.
Yeah, cool. 200. That's quite a number. So I'm very keen on diving deep into your expertise of building boards, boards that pay into the success of a company. And I just saw a statistic on your webpage. It remind me, is it 64% more successful is a company when they have a board that actually works and is well fitted?
Yeah, so there's actually quite a lot of research done into the effectiveness of boards. It's a little bit more tricky to get those precise figures from startups because, of course, there's so many of them and nobody tracks the data. But we're starting to collect that data. So I think in the coming years, we'll be looking to collaborate with one or two of the partners that we have, the business schools or universities, in order to get more clarity on that. But there's a lot of research that's been done by the likes of McKinsey, Deloitte, and other consulting companies that show, and maybe we could add some of these links into the show notes afterwards, but really show super performance gains, whether it's return on investment. I think it's something like 36% more. So companies with strong boards attracted 36% more investment. And clearly just outperform other companies in the market.
So why is that?
That's a really good question.
Well, maybe you start with, would you like to walk me through the typical tasks of board members? And then we can build it from there, maybe.
Yeah, sure. I think maybe to answer that question, first of all, we need to talk about what is a board, and what types of boards are there, because it's a pretty broad term, right? And there's a huge variety. I mean, board kind of means a collective, an organized body. And the two, or let's say three key board types you have are executive board, which in some jurisdictions is a requirement, in others not. And then you've got the two clear board types that we focus on with ppl, which are corporate board and advisory board. The difference between the two is that the corporate board really does hold the liability and responsibility. So represents the shareholders in the company and makes sure there's a degree of governance there. So overseeing the leadership team of a company. The advisory board is there to basically support the leadership team. So to advise them and to be there. And we can delve into a little bit more detail on this afterwards, but often will bring very specific skill sets with them that complement the leadership or the founder team. Mm-hmm. So that's really why a startup might consider putting together a board, because particularly in the first instance, they're often a very people come together with a fantastic idea, but they might have quite a concentrated skill set or background. And so with a board, you can basically extend that. You can see it as an extension of the founder team. And so bring in those kind of skills or industry know-how or contacts that the existing founder team or founder doesn't have themselves.
Mm-hmm. So as a startup, I would start with an advisory board rather than a corporate board. Is that right?
I think that's in most cases a safe assumption, yes, because normally in the very early stages, the founders themselves will be making up the corporate board. It also requires a lot of work. For many founders, it's a little bit scary thinking that somebody might be deciding about whether or not they will be continuing with the company, even though, if you have the right board together, they're going to be deciding in the right or the best interest of the company anyway. So it shouldn't really be a scary thing if you're confident. But in most cases, the advisory board is a perfect way to go, because it's a little bit loose knit versus a corporate board, even though it should be made formal with contracts and things like that. But you can really kind of create it how you want and how it best fits with your startup. Mm-hmm.
You just mentioned something very real, and I had a contact with a founder this week where the board basically decided that they would no longer be CEO because of management things they were not happy with. Mm-hmm. And now they removed him entirely. And now the company is going to close down. So, because it fits so perfectly at this point in time in our conversation, can a board also ruin a company?
There's a couple of examples right now, right, that have received quite a bit of attention and some assumption or finger pointing at the board for those failures or near failures. Mm-hmm. One being, if I'm to be specific, Credit Suisse, and the other one being the near failure of OpenAI. Mm-hmm. And I would say it to answer your question in one word, yes, I think it can. Slightly longer answer would be often the things that contribute to such a failure will come back to the constellation of the board. So one key constellation failure could be the amount of diversity in the board. Actually, there's a fantastic piece that was written by Antoinette Weibel, which perhaps we could also share in the show notes, mm-hmm. where she looks specifically at the case of Credit Suisse. And there, it was a couple of things, but primarily it was down to the balance or the perceived balance of power. So there, it doesn't really matter too much whether you have, from the outside, it looks like a very diverse board, if actually 2 or 3 of the board members are really wielding all of the power in that boardroom. But diversity in its broadest sense, so I like to call it cognitive diversity, and a balance of power can really ensure that you don't end up with a situation mm-hmm. like that. Mm-hmm. In the case of OpenAI, I don't know, and none of us know, also with Credit Suisse, the full inner workings and what happened and everything. But there, it looks from the outside as though the board, maybe for the right intentions, were representing their views. And I think it was a very different situation to Credit Suisse. But that clash of views kind of led to a bit of a stalling of, or potentially the wrong decisions. Maybe it was for the right reasons. We'll find out in hindsight.
Yeah, and often it's also around trust, right?
Yes.
Or where they say the relationship, the trustfulness is broken, it's irreparable. We need to change the person. But actually for OpenAI, I like that you mentioned this example because basically the people pulled him back in, right? Sam Altman, the CEO, with their movement on social media. And I traced that back to their company values. And they have this one value that ranks team really high. I mean, it's a common thing, teamwork, and we're a team and everything. But the very last sentence on their values statement on the website is, nothing is somebody else's problem. So everybody stood up for him because they all considered this move that was actually happening not just his problem. They could have said, oh, well, it's the CEO, his risk, bye. But they said, no, he's our leader. We stick together. We live this value. And they went out on platforms and posted the sentence, like, a company is nothing without its team. And it was so powerful. Now he's back installed. But that's just a quick detour to the culture part of it as well.
Absolutely.
It's a really, really strong story. And I really like telling that as well.
Yeah, it's a fantastic example of the strength of a strong corporate culture, right? And the impacts it can have on a business.
So you said what can lead to a failure with setting the board up the wrong way, basically, or having the wrong people on the board. Let's reverse engineer that and see how can we bring the right people on the board so that we minimize this risk, or that we're not culturally aligned, or that we run into a relationship where trust is at stake, or all these kind of things. What's your advice? When I am a startup, I want to start building my advisory board. How do I do that? Where do I look? What do I do first?
Okay, so we always start with the same few things at Board Owl, and it's a very guided process to help founders think about how they should put it together. And it always starts with two key things. One is I hate the term, but like the commonly referred to as hard skills. So looking at, let's do a competency or skill analysis on the existing founder and or leadership team and see what skills we believe would be necessary for our company to succeed right now or in the near-term future. And which of those do we have within the team already? Where do we have the gaps? That's one side of it. And then the other side, which we value as equally highly, is looking at what are our true values within the company and what are the personality traits that are important to us in anybody coming in, regardless of the level. And collectively, that will give you a very strong starting point for the type of board member that you're going to be looking for, or board members when you're putting together an advisory or corporate board. I would say that's the first part.
So looking at what I need very specifically, and in both areas, skills and traits.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now I have written it down. What do I do next? Do I post it on the internet? So
the next thing you do is you go to boardowl.com.
Okay, of course.
No, there are I would say 3 key ways you can source an advisor or advisory board member or board member. The one route is classic executive search firms. In most cases, those are going to be too expensive for a startup. So maybe reserved for later on in their path, sort of much further down the line when money is not a topic anymore. The other one, of course, is your own network. And there you have the benefit of one of the key traits that you highlighted, which I think are important for any board member, which is trust, because those are people who you know very well, you may have grown up with, etc. That also comes with a downside, though, because typically people who are very close to you may hold back from their true opinions and may look at things less critically because they're your cheerleaders and they want you to succeed. And But I wouldn't rule that out. So one of my advisors and now corporate board members was somebody from my immediate circle, but I knew him to be ruthlessly direct. The third option is to go for an option like Board Owl is, that enables you basically to go beyond your personal network. And in many cases, this is important because typically your network is made up of cognitively pretty similar backgrounds in people and educations and nationalities and things like that. So going through a platform like ours will enable you to cast the net much wider. I'm talking specifically about our process. It's highly curated. So you basically go onto the platform, you'll put in those details. So what are the key skills that you're looking for and personal traits and values in a person? What are you expecting from somebody in terms of a time commitment to your company? What is it you're looking to achieve with that composition or new composition of a board? And a few more details about your company. And then you receive a highly curated list of people, who have been matched with your opportunity and who have agreed to being put forward and are excited about your opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so 3 routes I can go. And once I have somebody at hand where I think this person brings the skills and the traits that my company would need to reach the business objectives we have set for ourselves for the next, let's say, 18 months. Mm-hmm. What do I do then? Do I have a coffee with them? Do I play chess with them? What do I do to find out whether that really sticks?
Everyone will have their own strategy, I guess. Some people will like to discuss over dinner or invite somebody over to their home or to see how they act as service staff in a restaurant or hotel. I think that's down to each and every person individually. However, what is very, very important is to have multiple touch points with that person and really to take your time for that discussion. Corporate boards tend to be together for a longer period of time, are really, really set for the long term, can be made up of investors, and so are going to be with you for many, many years, hopefully. Advisory boards are a little bit more dynamic in terms of their structure and will evolve and should evolve as your company evolves. So the duration is somewhat shorter than it might be with an employee or with a corporate board. But you should still be paying a lot of attention to make sure that it fits, and on a values perspective, and that goes both ways. So you also need to be very, very open and honest about where your company is right now, because if you're not, and you're largely pitching the opportunity and perhaps hiding some of the skeletons in the closet, then you're going to get the wrong person. There's nothing wrong with having some things which are not functioning perfectly in a startup. It's normal, but you have to be open about it because if you are, you're going to make sure that the person you're talking to and get on board knows about those things and is keen to help you with those very problems that you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And the trajectory might change based on these things. And then I have to have people on board knowing that, okay, here are the weak spots, or here's where I am needed desperately, or that they say, I can't help with that. In this constellation, I'm not the right person, even though on paper I have the right skills and the traits, etc. It sounds a bit, or very much so, like recruiting.
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, it is recruiting, right? Yeah. It's with one really key difference, actually, that I've observed over the last 4 years. So we did board recruiting beforehand through the executive search firm. But really seeing the volume now that we're getting, I mean, it's a huge multiple over what we could ever achieve with the classic model. And what's really exciting to see is actually versus recruiting for executive roles or roles within a team, there is a much greater openness from company founders and owners when it comes to appointing board members and what they bring to the table, because you might start out with a very clear view of, okay, this is what I want. Finding the right match is probably a little bit more. It's definitely, there is an element of science there, but also art, and basically deciding how broad to set the goalposts is the art part, right? Because you don't want to exclude somebody who could be of great value to the company, but doesn't quite fall into very narrow goalposts. But you also don't want to waste people's time and have people have conversations that they're not going to bring them further. And so what we've seen is that in many cases, company founders or owners will go into a process thinking, this is exactly what I need. And then they'll realize that actually somebody from a completely different sector has been through similar issues, regulatory or growth or whatever they may be in the past, and bring skills to the table which they hadn't even thought that they might need. And given the shorter term commitment, it's a little bit more of a gig economy, right? So somebody will come in and help you boost through that stage of growth or deal with certain challenges and get out again. You're not working with this person on an absolute daily basis. Right. You're getting them in, for what they can bring you for let's say typically 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. So it's a growth opportunity to boost your recruiting skills, and at the same time, it's a bit more relaxed than recruiting for a full-time employee.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so then let's say now that I have found my board members. They all said yes. I've been super clear with them. They're all excited. I have this group of, how many typically do I have? 5, 7, 10?
I'd say 5 is probably a good average number, and ideally keep it, particularly in a corporate board, but perhaps also in an advisory board, keep it an uneven number, right, to avoid any sort of locked votings.
Yeah, very good advice here as well. Now I have this group of 5 people because I listened to Daniel. He said 5. What do I do now so that they're not just sitting around waiting for me to call? But how can I build like a system or a structure so that I can really leverage my board? How do I pull out the maximum? Let's put it that way.
It's a really good question. And I think for some people, it's perhaps not so present to them when they first start out on this, that it does require time and effort to manage a board, whether it's advisory or corporate. And so you do need to put some structure into place. Now, it's completely up to you what that structure is. But I would say, giving some high-level advice, I would recommend that there are some clearly well-structured board meetings. So where okay, 3 or 4 times a year we're going to be sitting together, and this is going to be the format of those board meetings. And you, as the founding or ownership team, are going to be preparing for that in advance and sharing the board pack with them. I've always treated an advisory board like a corporate board, so I've been fully transparent about everything going on in the company, performance figures, financials, and things like that, because I just think that's how you get the very best out of the advisory board. There are some other companies that treat them a little bit more or have them a bit more at arm's length. But I really think you get the most out of an advisory board if you keep them close, and if you're diligent in the process of selecting them, you'll make sure that level of trust is there. And then it really depends on where you are with the company. So with Board Owl, for example, in the first 2 years, our advisory board was so close to us that they were practically an extension to our founder team. We had, to start with, weekly meetings. One of the advisors was working for us 30 to 40% and delivering a lot of education to startups through the partnerships that we had with various startup incubators and accelerators. And over time, we sort of reduced that because we just realized we didn't quite need that level of input anymore, or so many voices on such a regular basis. If I compare to Dart, for example, the executive search firm, we are much more, we treat it like a corporate board. So we just get together on those fixed dates that we've set. I think it's 3 times a year now. It used to be 4. But then we do reach out on a proactive ad hoc basis to those advisors, specifically to either business growth opportunities or to support us with very niche or specialized searches.
So you got them really on top of mind. They are top of mind for you.
Yes.
When you have a question or a challenge, you're like, yeah, I go ask them.
Exactly.
That's very good.
Exactly. So you've got the collective, which I think is important, and to get those voices and challenging each other as well as me as a founder. But then you've also got them as individuals as well, and can treat them as individuals, because if you've put your board together in a diverse fashion with everybody bringing a different level of different type of expertise and background, then you can reach out to them for specific topics, and we'll choose which one or which ones you reach out to. You don't have to get everybody together for every single topic.
Mm-hmm. I love that. We had an episode on diversity, so I really recommend listening to that as well, because we spoke about all the benefits that it brings to a company when you look for diversity soon enough. It has impact on the product and everything. So when you tell me now that with a intentionally built board that also includes these aspects of diversity, and you said cognitive diversity as well, then I am on the best path to success, right?
Absolutely. I think so. I'm a big advocate of diversity. I like to talk about cognitive diversity because I think cognitive diversity, if you've got that right, it necessitates that there are all other forms of diversity that lead to that cognitive diversity. And, one thing that just has to be said is that diversity of thought, background, education, all types of diversity will lead to differences of opinion. And that's what you're looking for. But you have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable to an extent. Mm-hmm. There will be, at times, heated discussions around certain topics, but it's exactly those discussions that lead to better outcomes. The hair on my back stands up. I don't have much hair on my back, but back of my neck, should we say, even though I don't have much. But I really, I can't stand it or really get nervous when I hear about people saying, the board always says yes to everything. I mean, it's then you don't need a board if that's the way you're going to be managing it. There are some instances where everybody's on board and thinks it's a good idea, but in many cases, most cases rather, I'll come out with a decision or a proposed decision, and I'll be challenged on it.
Yeah.
Sometimes because somebody really believes that I'm wrong, and sometimes because they're playing a very good role of playing devil's advocate and making sure that I've really thought of every other option as well.
Mm-hmm. That's actually a good thing to do, because I have lots of thoughts in my head right now. Where do I start sorting them? So being challenged, having conflict, being comfortable with the uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. For founders, that can be really a tough call, especially first-time founders, where you're totally new to building a company, the market, all the voices. And you said it earlier, lots of voices. Mm-hmm. How do they find their way through this? I mean, they have this advisory board because they want the opinions. How do they, or is there any way they can discern between, now I need to take a step back and kind of disengage or think about these things, or wow, they are right, I really have to take this on. Mm-hmm. Is there any way we as founders can learn that other than through failing miserably by listening to the wrong voices in the wrong moment? Or what kind of advice do you have, especially in regards of the advisory board?
Well, I think when it comes to advisory boards, I mean, hopefully you're going to have the right voices and not the wrong ones, and you're going to keep it concentrated. We talked about the number 5 beforehand. To start with, it might just be 3, right? You're managing less relationships, and you might be a little bit specific about those very few things that you think you're missing right now. Again, staying on the topic of advisory boards, one thing that is very important for the founder team to remember is an advisory board is there to support you. You as the founding team are still ultimately responsible. So, and there are cases that I've seen in the past where advisory boards start thinking that they are deciding with the founders on the future of the company. It's an advisory board. So, you are still the ultimately responsible person, and you need to manage that relationship accordingly and put it into perspective. So the advisory board will bring great advice, but your future still hangs much more on those decisions. And so the way to do it is to take that advice. You don't always need to make a decision within that board meeting. You can take it away and say, thank you very much for your input. And if you have the right people, you should very much be taking that input on board. But ultimately, you still need to make the decision over, are you going in this direction or that one?
That makes total sense. Can be a challenge sometimes, right?
Yes.
Do you have a board at Board Owl?
Of course.
Yes,
of course.
Of course.
Actually, I have two. So we have the corporate board and we have the advisory board. And we treat them somewhat differently. There's a lot of interaction between the two. And I would say the corporate board, quite similarly, and this is probably quite a good way to visualize it. The corporate board is quite similar to, I'm relating this now specifically to startups where there's a lot of growth, a lot of challenges, and there the board and the founding team are primarily focused on immediate term. Lots of challenges, things going wrong, customers complaining, tech not working, things like that. So just scrappy, right? You're focusing on that. And long term, where do we want to be? Like really long term. That's our goal, that's our vision, that's our dream. And where the advisory board fits in really well, of course, overlaps a bit with those, but really filling in the midterm. So saying, okay, this is where you want to be. You're really caught up in the here and now right now, but what are you doing in order to get there? Let's help you with these steps. So that's where they, I think, really, really fit in best.
That's super interesting. It adds another layer of managing them, but also of leveraging them. That's really fascinating. Are you on a board yourself? Are you a board member?
I am, yeah. So I'm on the corporate boards of all three companies that I founded myself. So I've found a different route into boards than yes. others do. It's more by necessity because I have to, and I don't have the capacity to sit on any others right now. But yeah, in two of those, it's on the board and in an executive role, and in the third one, it's non-executive.
Yeah. Wow, lots of hats to wear. What was your biggest challenge in the role of an advisory board member? Now I got it right. That you would like to share with us?
So the biggest challenge for someone
yes, because it's an interesting perspective, right? We touched a little bit as a founder, how do I work with them? But I would like to also understand, how is it for an advisory board member working with founders? Because I think that also helps understanding the relationship.
It's a really good question, because I think one of the biggest challenges I see is that a founder or company owner probably doesn't realize how the information flow is very, very different. When you're in the business every day, you're seeing everything that goes right, seeing everything that goes wrong, have interactions with all of the team. You've got a very, very good understanding of the business and its dynamics. And an advisory board or a corporate board doesn't have that same level of exposure. So it can make it quite difficult for an advisor or a board member to come up with the right advice if they don't have, or guidance or oversight, if they don't have that same level of knowledge. Knowledge is power. So you need to, and both sides need to work on this, right? So the board needs to push for information if they don't feel they have enough. And founders And owners can very much help by providing the right level of insights that are going to help get the advice and the support that they need. So another thing linked to that would be to not have board meetings spaced out too far between them, because otherwise there's a huge amount to catch up on. And even if you're sharing the pack a week in advance of a board meeting, there's still going to be a lot of open questions, and you're probably going to be spending, this is a mistake I made early on, because I was also very proud of, the progress we were making as a company, that we would basically spend about 3/4 of the advisory board meeting just sort of catching up on what we've been doing since the last one. And then you're not really getting the most out of the advisors. And so I think for many advisors and board members, that's what can be challenging, is sort of feeling a bit disconnected from the business, but still expected to deliver and support. And that can be a bit frustrating.
Yeah.
The other thing that's challenging for some who are moving into this type of role for the first time is moving from an executive role where they have been having a huge impact on the business and directing a business, sort of on the ground, in the weeds, to purely advising or overseeing. It's a big step, and they also need to learn that. Many make the switch very, very easily, but they do need to be conscious about that, and that's also something that we teach them about as well.
Yeah. So understand the own role and where I need to step back and basically tell people what they could do, but then still be okay if they don't do it, or do the exact opposite.
Yeah. I mean, it's
like, well, wasn't what I was thinking of, but.
If it happens all the time, then maybe there's not a match, right?
Yeah.
But that is, and you just touched on another thing. So it could be very frustrating for an advisory board member if you're investing your time into advising and overseeing a business and you don't see progress. So you agree on certain steps and nothing really happens from one board meeting to another. So that's also something that founders need to be aware of, but is also one of these added benefits of a board or an advisory board, which is increased accountability. So whereas previously, prior to having one, you're the only person kind of overseeing your own work, all of a sudden you're accountable to other people, whether through to a corporate board with actual, who holds liability and responsibility, or whether it's to a group of advisors. Yeah. You're still accountable. You're still going to have to tell them whether you did do what you said you would do in the last meeting or not.
Right. And how it turned out.
Yeah.
That's the other part. Maybe we can close this session also with closing the journey, in a sense, saying that because you said two things. Once an advisory board member is too passive, it might not be a good match. Or when I realize that they're not bringing the value that I need, or the relationship doesn't work out, or I just don't want to listen to them for whatever reason. So there may come the point in time where I want to separate from a board member. How do I do that? Is it tricky, painful, easy?
Yeah, I mean, these things are always to a degree painful, right? Because nobody wants to disappoint or upset somebody else, and typically, especially within a startup, it's such a close-knit group. But you can prepare for it and make the most likely inevitable separation at some point. We spoke earlier about how an advisory board needs to evolve as the company evolves, and you'll need different skill sets in 2 years' time than you will, say, a year ago. And you can reduce that level of pain that will be felt by managing expectations very early on. So what we advocate is really working on a 1 or 2 year contract, and making it quite clear that at this point we will be reassessing what the company needs and may renew or appoint somebody else into the advisory board. And so that's when things don't go super sour. If you do realize in the meantime, it's just not working out for me, then you've got to be honest about it and just hit it head on. Now, the advantage with an advisory board or board is it's not a formal employment situation. It's a mandate. And so it can be, and these things should be governed within a contract. And we have these sample contracts on Board L, and it's governed within that contract, but it's typically very short notice, and there's no employment labor law ramifications that you need to worry about. It's a very just sort of adult decision, but you have to do it. Don't avoid doing it, because it will really sort of eat up your time and be a drag. Yeah. So just deal with it, get it out of the way, and move on.
Yeah. Deal with the unpleasant stuff.
Exactly.
Rather than suffering from it for too long.
Be comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yes, right? There it goes again. Very good. So as a last statement, what would be, or what is your ultimate advice for somebody starting a company, thinking about putting together an advisory board?
That's a good question. So I'll start by saying there are 3 or 4 key traits that you should look for in anyone who you're pulling into your inner circle. You touched on one earlier, which is trust. So you need to be able to trust the person, and vice versa. Then look for integrity. Look for critical thinking and clear communication. Those are the things that I would be looking for in people who I'm going to be surrounding myself with. And then I'm going to add another one, which is a genuine excitement around and passion for your business and mission, what it is that you want to achieve. Because you don't want people joining your board because it looks great on their LinkedIn profile or in their CV. You want them with you for the journey and to help you get to where you want to get to, and the impact that you want to have on society. So that would be my advice. I would also add to that it's never too early to put together an advisory board. You might want to wait with the corporate board until a little bit later. It's probably going to be filled with a couple of investors anyway. But with the advisory board, it's really never too early. There are people who are excited about sharing and many founders are surprised about, the level of talent that is willing to get stuck into their little businesses. But in reality, many people are really excited about, perhaps in parallel to their executive careers, taking that expertise and that know-how that they've built up over many years and getting stuck into something new and disruptive, because they learn a lot from it as well. So don't wait too long. There may be some people who would prefer to wait until your company is a little bit further advanced, but there's going to be very many people who are also excited about helping you from the very beginning, and you can never have too much good help.
Awesome. That's a perfect closing statement, to be fair.
Super.
Well, for me, it was a valuable half plus a few minutes hour. I learned a lot. We touched many things: how to build a relationship, what to look for in an advisory board, how to find people, where to find them, how to assess them, and all the things, the good, the bad, the uncomfortable. Lots of really, really valuable advice here, Daniel. Thank you so much.
We had a ton of really good questions. It was ruthlessly efficient. So.
That's me too. That's how I am. So thank you so much for your time. And thank you for watching or listening. And if you want to learn more about Daniel and Board Owl, what they do and how you get in touch with them, there will be links down here under the video. And you can send a DM or an email, whatever works best. The same is for me and the People Kickstarter, what I do, how I support startups, and how you could work with me. And thank you so much for spending your precious time with us. I hope you learned as much as I did and enjoyed the series and this episode and the season finale as much as I did as well. So let me know your feedback, get in touch. Like I said, leave a like for this episode, share it with somebody who might benefit from it too, and subscribe to the channel for anything that will come next. So stay tuned. Thanks for your time. Take care and bye-bye.